Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Thank you guys so much for joining us again on another Sunday, beautiful afternoon out here. We have lots to talk about as usual, guys. We're talking about the ASICBoost patent, the future of hardware wallets, and 2018. Is it the year of crypto or not? We're going to find out. We're going to talk about it today. Lots of awesome guests. I can't wait to introduce the panelists. But before we do that, we're going to go through your guys' quick bit section. And again, guys, all the links for the topics and the quick bits are all in the show notes below, as always. So you guys can always check that out. So let's get right into it. The current Mayer multiple is about 1.02, definitely flashing a buy signal, guys. I'm really proud of this next one, guys. Listen to this. I hope you guys come and join us. Myself, Adam Meister, Andy Hoffman, Mike Krieger, Jack Mallers, and more in Denver, Colorado, April 25th, guys. I really hope you guys can join us there and meet us there. Say hello in person. We're really excited to bring you guys this like 3-hour Q&A panel. So really excited. I think it's only $20. Got the link in the show notes, guys. Check that out. Really excited to see you guys in real life and shake your guys' hands. So it'll be really fun. Shout out to DJ Booth 007, guys. Again, this guy's amazing. If you guys heard this week, he made a Twitter bot that helps warn people about crypto scam tweets on Twitter, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's pretty obvious. Every single tweet from Bitfinex or whatever now has a tweet underneath it that says, send Ethereum here, send Bitcoin here. And so a lot of scams out there on Twitter, we're hoping that Jack does something about this. It's getting kind of crazy, but DJ Booth stepped up to the plate with a pretty awesome code, with some pretty awesome code, creating this Twitter bot that hopefully will warn people. The Pineapple Fund, guys. I don't know if you heard about this, but this is a pretty amazing thing. The Pineapple Fund has finally given away all 5,057 Bitcoin, which were converted into $53 million to 59 organizations, ranging from $250,000 to $5 million each. So thank you so much, Pineapple Fund. Thank you guys for that. Thank you for funding all that charity. Really awesome to see the Bitcoin community give back. If you guys think that's cool, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till the price goes to 100,000. We're gonna probably have some kind of multi-million-dollar Pineapple Fund at that point. So really looking forward to that. Next up we got the PAC coin. I don't know if you guys caught this, but it was pretty hilarious over the weekend. Oh no. It might be frozen. I'm completely frozen. Let's see. Oh, there we go, back. Oh my gosh. That was fun, guys. Frozen in time there. This is how we do it live right here on the World Crypto Network. So sorry about that, guys. My whole computer froze up. So maybe it didn't freeze for you guys, but it froze for me. So there we go. Back to the news. So the PAC token was on CoinMarketCap this week, just a couple of hours. It just really proves the market cap, guys, that it's completely ridiculous. They printed 2.7 trillion tokens, and so with about 20 or 30 Bitcoin volume, the freaking thing blew up to $38 billion market cap. So just completely ridiculous, guys. Don't pay too much attention to those market caps. They are being completely gamed at this point with the ability to just print out as many tokens as you want. A little bit bad news for ICOs out there. It looks like the FinCEN suggested that money transmitter rules should apply to ICOs. So if you guys are doing an ICO, be aware of that. There is a whole lot of regulation coming that way, I think. And looks like Binance had a bit of a hack, I guess, this week. They didn't get hacked, quote unquote, right? But there was some malicious activity that somebody used to try to actually, people use their API keys. They use some social engineering to acquire people's API keys to try to move some funds. Unfortunately, that was completely thwarted by Binance's internal systems. So thank you guys. Thank you, Binance, for that, for programming the systems. Nobody actually lost any funds. So that's pretty awesome. Without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. This is how we do it live right here, guys. So let's go ahead and introduce the amazing panelists. I'm super proud to bring you guys these guys, new people every week to talk about Bitcoin, to give you guys our opinions and on what we think is going on. So let's introduce them one by one. First, we got Mr. Michael Goldstein joining us for the first time, believe it or not, guys, the other half of the Noted podcast, and of course from the Nakamoto Institute. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, Michael.
So glad we finally got to make this happen.
Yes, man. I'm so glad. It's awesome. So thanks for joining us, Michael. Really glad to have you on the program. Joining us once again, guys, Mr. Francis Pulio from CadillacC.com. Francis, how you doing?
I'm doing great. This is a great panel today. It's going to be such a fun episode. So thanks again, guys, for having me back on again.
Absolutely, man. Your mining insights is absolutely priceless, Francis. So thank you so much for giving us your insights on the community. Joining us once again, Mr. Daniel Robinson from Chain. Daniel, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on again. I'm excited about the topics too.
Yes, sir. Creator of the Ivy smart contract IDE, guys. You guys got to check that out. Being able to write smart contracts with Bitcoin, really, really slick. And finally, without further ado, people, the legendary cypherpunk entrepreneur, Bitcoin pioneer, inventor of the first mining pool and the Trezor, Slush himself. Slush, how are you doing today, Slush?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, man, for joining. Really, really appreciate it, Slush. We're going to have a good time, man. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. I'm really glad to have you on the program. Of course, I'm a longtime fan, obviously, Slush, of your work. Really, really love the Trezor. So really, really thank you so much for that work. So let's go ahead and get right into it with the first topic, ladies and gentlemen, the Overt ASICBoost patent. I want to talk a little bit about Slush. Actually, Slush Pool now just started making their pool compatible with this Overt ASICBoost, and so maybe you can tell us a little bit, Slush, about your thoughts of this ASICBoost patent. Is it good? Is it bad for the community? And why did the Slush Pool decide to begin accepting it?
I think the ASICBoost is clearly positive, or the defensive patent license for ASICBoost is clearly positive for the community, because there's nothing wrong with the ASICBoost itself. It's just an optimization. Like we had a lot of optimization on CPU mining, GPU mining before. This is just a smart way, a really smart way, how to reduce the complexity of the chip design. So it's nothing wrong with the algorithm of ASICBoost itself. The problem was that with the covered ASICBoost or with the patent itself, not everybody was open to use this in its hardware or its with the miner itself. So this is problem, because it makes advantage of one group of miners, and disadvantage for others. So with the defensive license for ASICBoost, I think a lot of or new hardware will include the ASICBoost for everybody to use. So this the good way is that it will make the mining cheaper for the given hash rate, and it's of course it's more eco-friendly and so on.
So you're saying, it's cheaper, right? So it sounds like you're saying that it's good for the ecosystem overall. It's where people get confused is the covert ASICBoost. That's the one that there's a patent for that not everybody can access. It's the Overt ASICBoost that has been patented, and we never actually had an issue with that. Because we can actually see that on the blockchain. We can see proof of this. So I don't think anybody in the community ever took issue with that. It was the covert ASICBoost that was the issue. Is that right, Slush?
Yeah. I think it's right. There were some legal issues with patents in mining industry before, and I think it's very cool that there is new hardware going on the market, which will introduce ASICBoost in the free open way. So it's clearly, from the market forces view, it's clearly positive and bullish for Bitcoin.
Awesome. Yeah, we see new entrants into the space. I mean, we see Halon Mining coming in, right, and things like that, and they don't seem to be too worried about. And Halon actually announced as well, right, that their chips are Overt ASICBoost compatible, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. We are in touch with these guys, and of course they had a problem with introducing the chips. With Overt ASICBoost, you need to change the API for the pools. Even new hardware is really hard to run on solo mining. So they contacted us, and we worked together in a way how to improve the Stratum protocol to enable enable Overt ASICBoost. And just a few days ago, we introduced it publicly. But of course, because we are enemies or any patents or any other crazy vendor lock-in, and so everything is open, and we will welcome more pools or more entities to implement this protocol, because the ASICBoost hardware is coming.
Very cool, very cool. So before I go to the next panelist, let me just ask you real quick, Slush. You know, there's been some talk about maybe there could be a 51% attack. You know, maybe talk about needing to change the proof of work. What are your thoughts on that? Are you worried at all about 51% attack in the current state? And do you think other manufacturers entering the space like Hailong are worried either?
Yeah. I think, well, I was afraid of these kind of attacks last year, but I think this as more as the mining is getting more decentralized, which will happen with more manufacturers in the field and with more publicly available hardware, the chance of single entity controlling such huge mining power is getting low. So I'm not so worried as before. And of course, change of proof of work is clearly possible. Technically, but I see the problems. I see many problems with this, and some of them are underestimated. Like, well, we can technically agree on some new algorithm which we will use in the Bitcoin D, but how this will be different than, for example, Bitcoin Gold or some other fork which change the proof of work, because there is a problem with the sudden change of algorithm, that suddenly the network is much more weak, or it's weakened, because there's suddenly no hardware securing the network. So of course this open a lot, many other issues which are not visible at other option, like proof of work change. It's possible, but I don't think it will happen.
Okay, yeah, interesting comment. So you're saying basically because now we're having more entrance into the space, more hardware like Hailong mining, and more competition, and with the higher price of Bitcoin, we are getting more decentralization in the mining. Is that what you're saying, Slush?
This is quite interesting topic, that people watch the mining ecosystem or industry as somehow closed economy, but it's not correct, because as the Bitcoin is changing and as there is much more money, it's getting relatively cheaper for other players to step into the mining, because few years ago, $30 million for inventing or producing own chip was quite a lot of money, because the industry was much smaller, and it was not so interesting for other manufacturers to step in. But as the price is on 10,000 or 20,000 or similar price, it's really more accessible for even smaller groups to design its own chips. And thankfully, the Satoshi design, or he chose the double SHA 256. I'm pretty sure it was by intention to choose a very simple algorithm, which is easy to make in a hardware itself, because there are other GPU enabled or GPU positive altcoins which has a problem that they are vendor locked with AMD ATI or so on, because it's really hard to reinvent GPU for any competition. So well, AMD is not in the mining business yet, or I think they are not in Bitcoin politics yet, but it's definitely also the monopoly on the market. So I think it's really cool that Bitcoin is working on a simple to implement algorithm. So the competition is it can happen, and it's happening.
Great points, because that's a good point. I think that Satoshi chose that as well. So SHA-256, because of the simplicity, like you say. If we mined on GPUs, I mean, those are incredibly complex, incredibly inefficient for trying to do just a single task, right? So how could anybody just jump in? Because we do already have a monopoly on GPUs. Right, so that's already there. AMD and NVIDIA, there's like nobody else really, and so that's really interesting. But with SHA-256, now anybody can kind of create a specific ASIC chip, right? All you kind of need to be able to do is get the fab together, right, and start printing it out. So that's of course why Bitcoin mining centralized in China in the beginning, because they had access to fabs, right? If it was GPU from just forever and ever and ever, it would have turned out something completely different. But because it was SHA-256, the mining hardware at the time, first got centralized in China. But now, of course, that is moving away. That's moving out. More and more competition is coming in. People are leaving China. More hardware is coming in to the world. So very interesting stuff. So thank you very much, Slush, for your insights on that. Oh, go ahead, Slush.
I have one more interesting thing to right now, there are like 4 foundries, like 4 companies on the board, which are able to implement ASIC chip, or produce ASIC chip with competitive performance. So it's like Intel, Global Foundries, Samsung, and I forgot the 4th one. So even if we will have more competition on the ASIC manufacturer level, like Bitmain or Holland Mining, we still have only 4 companies on board which can physically produce the chips, not on a logical level, but on a physical level. So right now, the entry barrier for a chip on a competitive speed is like $30, $40 million. But the complexity of building the factory for doing these chips is like $1 billion. So Bitcoin still have space for growing, because if it will work like in a few years, like the expansion of Bitcoin ecosystem, I expect that in a few years you'll see the factories building chips. Yeah,
great point. I mean, there's just so much room right now for competition. Huge amounts of room for competition. And like you say, I mean, if there was some kind of PoW change at this point, it would be no difference between that and Bitcoin Gold. It would just simply kind of be another fork, because at this point, the Bitcoin is too decentralized to kind of do something like that. And again, the net benefit is almost zero. We would completely start from the beginning, risk the security of the network, completely destroy all of the new competition that's coming in. And of course, the only person that'll be ready and waiting in the wings for something like this, Bitmain, right? So their monopoly would increase even further. So very interesting stuff, Slush. Thank you so much. Let's go to Francis here. Since we're talking a little bit about mining here, what are your comments so far, Francis, on what Slush's comment said and the Overt ASICBoost patent? What are your thoughts on it? Is this like good or bad for the community? And do you see it? Do you see any type of issues, for example, that we were discussing with the 51% attack or anything?
I mean, so far the comments have been fantastic. Slush has covered pretty much all the points that I wanted to cover. One thing that is really powerful about proof of work, when you compare it to some of the other alternatives like proof of stake, is that it's really truly the one that's 100% permissionless, in the sense that you can really truly, in fact, go in your garage and create a miner and then plug it in your wall, and no one will know. You don't have to ask. For example, in proof of stake, of course, if you want to stake your coins, you need to buy the coins from someone who is presumably the staking entity who is getting the reward. Proof of work is really entirely permissionless, which makes it completely great. Right. So if you look at the dangers to that, you have obviously the centralization of the mining manufacturer itself is not a danger. It's when they start to use their monopoly position, for example, to deny access to the miners at certain points, charge more for certain things, and if and it's only a threat if they actually mine and they want to perform a 51% attack themselves. And the other danger, however, is those patents, right? So because those patents are something that, first of all, it introduces a new payoff, right? The fact that it's secret, the secret advantage introduces a new payoff, which the other participants in the game don't know about. So that's one of the really negative parts of that. So if you look at the activation of SegWit and all that kind of stuff, everybody was trying to figure out, what are the trade-offs to this? Why is the consensus not working and evolving towards an upgrade? Perhaps it's because there's this secret payoff that we don't know about, and then Bitcoin's ecosystem relying on game theory that introduces some kind of unknown there. And the other part of it is, of course, the fact that if there's a patent in mining, any little advantage is huge. And it's really my belief that on a really long enough timeline, any kind of slight advantage would lead to a complete centralization, right? Like on a super long enough timeline. So if you have these government-enforced patents, essentially, that are blocking some participants from being more competitive than others, that obviously can lead to a lot of problems. So, I mean, and one of the reasons why people want to have those patents and keep these things private is because they invest a lot of money into making those optimizations, and they're looking for some way to benefit, to have a return on their investment. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about open source for software before we continue on the hardware, because I was having some thoughts on that, because I think it's obvious to us why open sourcing software is good, but maybe not for all of our audience or people that are new to the open source community. So when you're open sourcing software, what you're doing is obviously you're relinquishing IP and some rights that you otherwise would have. And I want people to understand that that's not the selfish act in itself. It's very much a self-interest motivated act, because when you do that, what you obtain is feedback. What you obtain is contributors. What you obtain is expertise, right? By open sourcing your software, but also contributing to other open source software projects. Your company, your corporation gets a lot of expertise. That's a good way to train staff. You get a lot of recognition when you open source software, which is something that you otherwise would not get. You get resources and trust. When you open source software, you also get all sorts of advantages like distribution of your code. So if you have open source software out there, people will just grab that code and integrate it into their app without needing to go through a sales cycle. And you might not get software sales from that, but you get all sorts of an ecosystem which is dependent somewhere on your code. And you can have a first to market advantage, and you can also steer the development. So these are all things that people must understand. Like open sourcing software is a kind of self-interested, it can be a self-interested motive of venture, and all of these benefits of open source software can greatly outweigh and provide a good ROI for all that research. In the hardware space, it might be a little bit more difficult because the ROI you get is by selling something. And patents are more enforceable. So I mean, it's not as easy to open source hardware. There's all sorts of things that you sometimes you just can't, right? Because you're using as part of your hardware solution something that by contract from a supplier you can't open source. But there are still great advantages, because in mining, for example, the first to market advantage is absolutely gigantic. I mean, it's not like first to market advantage to distribute like some hardware wallet. Like if you're mining and you get that first to mover advantage, like you have a massive competitive advantage over your competitors for a certain time. So just that, as far as I'm concerned, is enough to justify $30-40 million R&D, which is the barrier to entry, as Slush mentioned aptly, to actually getting a chip. So yeah, so that's pretty much my thoughts on that. I'm very bullish on the mining industry. I'll just reiterate what Slush said. I'm seeing a lot of new entrants in the space. I recently met a company by 5 young Canadian entrepreneurs that built the chip, and they're getting all the supply chain in order, and all sorts of really cool things going on. There's also the centralization of mining is not it's not a to me, it's not a pressing issue anymore. I think the hash rate is gonna explode in the near future. Like totally, like kind of like when the S9 came out, you could see kind of a huge spike in hash rate. I think we're gonna go through like there was a spike obviously when ASIC got invented, and then the S7 and then the S9. You can actually see it on the hash rate graph. I think we're going to see another kind of hash rate event, which is good. And that speaks to the last point I wanted to talk about proof of work change and stuff like that. I've been really thinking a lot recently about, you know, why people don't see the value, like why people see value in all the shit coins and all the altcoins and other things, and like how can I communicate better the idea of like digital scarcity and what's scarce. And I really came to the conclusion that, you know, what blockchains are offering as a unique scarce feature is the censorship resistant, at least for Bitcoin. So if you think about all the features of Bitcoin, really truly the one that it's almost irreplaceable is that censorship resistance, because it's the result of like an incredible amount of layered network effects that are feeding into each other. One of the most important ones being the hash rate and the price. You know, at the core of that, you know, the price driving the hash rate, demand for hash rate up, and more hashes coming in, which is, you know, itself the result of, you know, developers, applications, merchants, speculators, holders. And, you know, I'm sure Michael has some thoughts on that. You can see the whole cycle of the value of where the value of Bitcoin comes from. It's because there's all these self-feeding relationships that are building on top of each other. And, you know, if you take the proof of work out of the equation, I mean, like you will never be able to just replace what Bitcoin has achieved by taking a part of it and duplicating it, right? Without keeping that network effect. So, I mean, I don't see the proof of work change as being something that's possible. I think exactly as we mentioned, if you change the proof of work, you're just kind of like saying, oh, I have Bitcoin, but shorter block time. You may have a better feature. I mean, the proof of work may be better, but that's the value is not in that feature. The value is the network and everybody staying together in cohesiveness and in consensus all the time. That's the true value. So if you break that, then you can't just take Bitcoin and add a feature, remove a feature, and just keep the value.
Absolutely, because again, then it would be Bitcoin Gold. There would be no difference. As many people keep trying to tell, you know, the JW is on Twitter and you know, many other people, Brian, you know, the Block Digest crew. There's a bunch of people out there that are trying to tell people this and trying to remind people this. And you too, Francis, really appreciate all the information that you've been talking about on Twitter as well. And so, yeah, maybe let's go to Michael to see what his thoughts are on this, and to see what you think. Maybe you can jump what you want to do, Michael, if you want to talk about the 51% stuff first with the proof of work change, or if you want to go ahead and talk about your thoughts on the mining currently and the ASICBoost patent.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the ASICBoost patent. You know, I think it's important to remind everyone how every actor in Bitcoin is and should be treated as sovereign. So every investor is a sovereign individual. Every developer is a sovereign individual. Every miner is a sovereign individual, et cetera, et cetera. And so everyone has the complete freedom to do whatever they want in a permissionless way. So when it comes to ASICBoost, I don't have an inherent problem with ASICBoost itself. If someone comes up with a new way of doing mining that works for them, and they have the means to keep it to themselves and keep it a secret and, you know, kick ass in mining and make a lot of money doing it, that's a success for capitalism, you know, for them. That's how capitalism works. They get the earnings from that. However, you know, the big problem with the covert ASICBoost was the fact that they were using the power of the state through patents in order to secure their ability to be the only ones who could do that. And it's fine to keep a secret, but if someone else comes up with the idea or learns how to do the same thing, they should have every right to be able to do it with their own hardware. And so to use the power of the state to keep them from doing that, that is not justifiable. So I'm really excited to see what people are doing. I can't wait for the Halong mining chips to come online. And the very idea of the defensive patents is very exciting to me. Now, I'm not a patent lawyer, so I don't know how stuff like this will actually play out in court. That's something to ask someone like you know, Stefan Kinsella, or someone else who knows more than me. But the idea, the fact that people are thinking on these terms and trying to come up with ways to route Bitcoin innovation around these state apparatuses is very important, because that is one of the many attack vectors that exists in Bitcoin. As far as the proof of work change goes, You know, it's always been on the table as the nuclear option, and it is something that can be changed. So for instance, like if someone found a way to break SHA-256, which, you know, is not completely impossible, you know, I'd take this hat off and put on a UAHF hat on and call for a change to a proof of work algorithm that is not known to be broken. And I'm sure the miners would hate me for that just as much as for this hat. So that is an option. And, you know, I'm not inherently against the very idea of doing it. But in the current context, you know, just as Francis and everyone else is explaining, there's so many reasons to be bullish about decentralization of mining as it currently stands, with all of these new mining innovations coming out. And as Slush was pointing out, just the lowering costs of innovating in mining. You know, mining is very much mining centralization is very much a sort of claim that there's a natural monopoly in energy. But as Francis was pointing out, you know, anyone can come innovate without asking anyone's permission, as long as you have the capital to do so and you have the means to relay the block out to the network. You can come up with a new way to mine a block. So as the price of Bitcoin goes higher, we have more and more opportunities to look for. You know, one day someone's going to come up with a way to, you know, tie up a miner to a thorium reactor or something like that, and just have a huge surge of energy that helps them out. And these things will happen. So, but anyway, so there's so many reasons to be bullish. So the idea of using proof of work change to deal with it now, I don't see what there is to deal with. I think we should kind of, you know, let the market do its thing, and not try to micromanage. On top of the fact that the proof of work change, I don't actually see what it would solve in this context, because it would take a lot of miners offline with a lot of collateral damage as well. A lot of people not named Jihan Wu will have lost a lot of money in their investments. But it wouldn't suddenly make, you know, Bitcoin so-called ASIC proof, if that's even something that you would want, which I don't think it is something you would want. So all you would be doing is starting the cycle over. And I think taking a very, very long-term view of Bitcoin requires, you know, thinking about how to fundamentally solve problems rather than just kind of get scared about the current state of the market and freak out and do something rash or whatever. So
yeah, so many good points in there, Michael. Let me ask you just a quick question. A quick follow-up question. Do you ever see Bitcoin mining just being completely commoditized to the point to where it's just everywhere, like in every device?
That's hard to say. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, maybe we'll ask Slush real quick. Just real quick. Do you ever see mining just being eventually completely commoditized to the point to where it's just everywhere? Like nobody can actually have a specialty in it per se. Like it's just everywhere.
Yeah. I'm not sure if everywhere, like it doesn't have a sense to have a mining chips in routers and set-top boxes, because it doesn't have any utility in such devices. But I believe, and we are slowly moving this way, that it's clearly possible that Bitcoin mining will be used as heater units. And I know there were some devices trying this. I'm not sure they are doing it right yet, but I clearly see that there is a huge possibility, because not everywhere, but there are parts of the world where the gas heating is not possible, and they are using electricity heating anyway. So it's clearly the opportunity to simply reuse the heating, which is for normal mining. The heat is extra cost because you have to cool it, but for heating, it's extra utility for the mining. And of course, it's a huge opportunity for mining decentralization, because right now it makes sense to build huge factories full of miners and have staff watching it and watching the cooling stuff and so on. And I bet that in a few years it will be clearly possible to decide if you want to buy for your house gas heater, electricity heater, or mining heater, and this kind of heater will pay you every month your bills. Yeah. So
yes, I'll take the Bitcoin heater, please. Thank you so much. No, that's awesome, Slush. Go ahead.
I think this makes sense. Putting mining into routers doesn't make sense.
Yep. So many good points. Oh, Michael, did you have something you said? Oh, sorry, I thought you raised your hand. Okay. Yeah, so really good points from Slush and Michael. I really think that Bitcoin will incentivize energy optimizations and efficiencies across the planet. I think it will I think Bitcoin will turn out to be the greenest energy initiative this planet has ever even taken on. It will turn out that way, I believe, in the future. That it will just incentivize so much efficiency. So very cool stuff. And again, Michael, great points. I mean, because these patents exist, we need defensive patents. I think on the whole patent thing, we need them to protect us against the state patents. And what you said was really great, where this defensive patent allows us to route around these state kind of these state roadblocks with these things that are being pushed like patents, right? So very, very interesting stuff. I mean, I really like what you said about letting the market decide and not micromanaging with a proof of work change, because that really is what it would be, just micromanaging what the market is already evolving. And it's really evolving, and like everybody has said so far, it's evolving in great ways. There's so much stuff to be bullish on the Bitcoin mining topic. So let's go ahead and go with last but not least, Daniel Robinson. Daniel, man, I've really been curious to hear your thoughts, man, on this whole conversation so far. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I wasn't a patent lawyer, securities lawyer, so maybe more to say as far as the legal questions on sort of some of the later topics. But in general, I haven't really taken a close look at the language of the blockchain defensive patent license. But I really like it as an idea. Generally, patent pools have done wonders, I think, defensive patent pools in the tech industry. The biggest example is the Open Invention Network, which was founded to protect Linux users and patents and collect patents around Linux and use them strategically to prevent anyone from suing around that. And that's something that I've actually, I think a lot of people in the industry have been pushing for a while, is to try to get sort of a blockchain industry patent pool among the mostly Silicon Valley based companies that would much rather patents not exist. But given that they do exist, ideally you want to have the good guys, the sort of entities that don't want to use them aggressively in order to hurt, say, Bitcoin, so that they're banding together and they can combine their forces to strategically litigate in favor of those goals. I think starting it with miners is a great idea. I think the ASICBoost patent probably maybe considered the most dangerous patent in the space. Starting with that is fantastic teeth for a patent pool like this to have. I'd be curious, Slush. So has Slush Pool signed on to the BDPL yet, or are you planning to? If you can talk about it.
Sorry, signed for what?
For the blockchain defensive patent license. Are you a licensee now?
We don't we don't need to sign, because this is a hardware patent. So we are just providing services for miners, and the mining manufacturer need to sign this patent pool. So it's not for us.
Got it. Okay, fair. But I do think with that, to the extent that threat is now neutralized, again, you have to really look at the specific language of the patent license in order to really know maybe there's some catch in there that might prevent someone from wanting to sign on that would otherwise be an honest miner. But ultimately, I think it's the right approach. I think having a pool that starts with the ASICBoost patent, but then any other mining improvement patents go into there could be it would be a really good arsenal to prevent any miner from trying to use patent assertions to stop other miners from competing. As for the sort of proof of work change, and I think this is related to that, I sort of think the ideal is that no research should have to go into building better chips. That's generally, it's an arms race. Ultimately, it's wasteful. It's socially wasteful. And I think SHA-256 we've gotten really to a point with ASICs where once you've got ASIC boost in, for the most part, it seems like we're coming close to just the limits of physics as far as how fast we can compute SHA-256. Assuming there's no sort of major revolution in cryptography or in computer science that changes that, I think that's sort of the optimal situation. Just because, again, I think any investment spent in improving chips ultimately helps you in the short term, but then everyone else eventually catches up with it. And we're just sort of at the same point we were in security as you were before that. So I think having specialized hardware is pretty good. We know there's a lot of negative externalities from GPU miners, just in terms of like stuff using, or CPU miners, just in terms of stuff like browser malware and botnets. Whereas with ASICs, it's sort of more of a, it's not something that will tend to have these sort of negative externalities on like Internet of Things and consumer hardware. So honestly, I've been fairly convinced that I think the SHA-256 SHA-256 is a good choice because it's so simple, and that we're at the sort of point in its life cycle where to start over would be a big mistake. In the long run, unlike probably any of you, I think some proof of stake or other non proof of work system will ultimately prove more efficient and prove workable. But some of us have argued about this on Twitter.
That's a whole different discussion.
But I won't, for the sake of as far as among proof of work algorithms, I think it makes no sense to me to try to change off of one, which is, again, it's at the sort of mature stage where it's basically it's close to a stable state. Although I think the developments that are happening seem relatively positive to me.
Awesome. Lots of great points. So let me ask you, Daniel, what do you think about like the kind of game theory of the defensive patent, where I believe you kind of have to disclose any other patents once you join that patent group? Yeah,
you have to disclose them, and you have to offer them under the same license. It's something where, so for example, the defensive patent license works similarly. And again, I haven't looked closely at the BDPL license terms, so maybe I think it does have some additional terms that aren't in the DPL. Which I couldn't really comment on. But with the generally the logic of it makes a lot of sense. The problem with the DPL is that there aren't, with no offense intended to Peter Todd, who's a member of it, there aren't really any big blockbuster patents that are currently licensed under that and under the DPL. So there isn't that much of an incentive to. Given that the BDPL now has the ASICBoost patent under it, I think there's a very strong incentive for any miners to get in on that, and just the competitive pressure to actually, you have to use ASICBoost. To use ASICBoost, you have to get under this license. You'll have to disclose all other patents. I think is a great way to sort of get all these patents out into the open and to and licensed.
Very, very good. Yeah, because I really never have seen anything quite like this. You say it's a little bit kind of standard with defensive patent, but man, it's just amazing to me. Like to think about the game theory that goes into this. It's almost like another Bitcoin where it just sucks all of the the just everything into this vortex, right? So Bitcoin sucks everything, and now this Bitcoin patent kind of will suck all of the patents into it almost for Bitcoin, which again, of course, is absolutely amazing for the ecosystem at large.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Very awesome. Very cool. All right. Does anybody else have any comments on this topic before we move on? Francis, go ahead.
Yeah, just regarding the commoditization of mining, it's definitely kind of a nice futuristic vision to think about it at the retail level, like in our houses and our devices. But at an industrial level, it's already kind of happening, and I can definitely see some signs of like real commoditization. If you look at the large kind of industrial companies that are looking at mining, we're looking at, for real, like these are really looking at Bitcoin mining, like large paper mills, large steel factories, ports, all sorts of like heavy industry. I'm going to be heading to like the Northwest Territories in Canada. Like that's really far. That's really far up north to talk about like mining, because they have all sorts of infrastructure there that can be repurposed. So I mean, if you're like, I mean, you know, the big kind of containers that are filled with Bitcoin advantage, because you can move them around from one different like electricity producer to another to eat away their surplus. So in a country like Canada, where we have like a lot of renewable hydro, you can't choose when, you know, you need to produce the electricity. It's just there, and the demand isn't always there. So that's kind of like a commodity. And you think about like, okay, so what can a miner optimize after he's bought the miners and they've installed it and he's chosen a good location with like with a good electricity rate? The only thing he can do is like optimize the airflow and the cooling and the heating. So like the miner for like 365 days a year, when he's not doing his accounting or like buying or like unloading the miners and plugging them in the wall, all he thinks about is optimizing the airflow. I've seen buildings that are collapsing from the inside because the airflow is like so optimized, like that the whole structure is like, because the miners, like they walk around, if you accompany a miner in a mine, like he walks around, he's like he has X-ray goggles. He sees all the air, the hot air, the cool air, and everything is super optimized. So like during all that time where the miners trying to optimize that, like miners have come up with insane strategies, like air coming in and out. And as Slush said, like that air can be sold to other industry, which is part of this idea of commoditization. Like there's this big factory in Quebec where they cut sheets of metal in two. They just cut sheets of metal in two, like large sheets, and it's like all open because trucks are coming in and out, but they heat it anyway because the workers need to have the heat. I mean, like you can take one of those big container, like the Bitchery block box, you can put it next to the factory. It's mining with the electricity. They already have amazingly low electricity rates and like an amazing power connection. So there's like this amazing symbiosis, which again is driving down the cost of mining, incentivizing decentralization, and incentivizing those hardware producers to create better miners, because there's all sorts of consumers. So I mean, it's not a pipe dream. Like this is happening, and to me, like the near-term future is full-on commoditization of mining at the industrial level and at the power grid level. And like it, you know, as Dan said, there's such a thing as the laws of physics, right? At some point, like in 15, 20 years, when, you know, one miner, there's not going to be more optimization. And at the end of the day, like the only competitive advantage you'll get is the electricity rate and the heat outputs that you can reduce.
Absolutely. I think, I think Francis is right. We're going to probably soon see another spike in that, in the history of Bitcoin mining. So very interesting stuff. Awesome stuff, guys. Does anybody else have any other thing to say before we go? All right, cool. So this has been a pretty amazing topic, guys. Kind of a multifaceted topic there. So it took a little bit, you know, longer, more of our time than normal, but really cool stuff. I'm pretty excited to get to the next topic here. But before we do, if everybody could just please give us a thumbs up. If they like what they see, go ahead. And if you guys are new, go ahead and subscribe to the World Crypto Network below. We're getting more and more subscribers every day, putting out more and more content. We're getting a lot of people on our audio stream content as well, including Tone Vase has got a bunch of his stuff on there as well. So he's doing some experimentation. We had some fun this morning trying to experiment with Zoom software, trying to maybe get some better software in there than Google Hangouts. So very interesting stuff, guys. Got to check that out. Again, you know, Tone Vase and many other people are on our audio stream. So guys, definitely check that out at World Crypto Network or iTunes. So very cool stuff. Let's go ahead and move along to the next topic. So this is pretty interesting because, you know, we have Slush on the show, right, guys? So we got to talk about hardware wallets here. And so Slush, let me ask you, like, what's kind of going on in the hardware industry in general? Like, is it growing like crazy? Are you seeing more and more manufacturers, or what can you tell us about it?
Yeah. Well, before talking about the hardware wallet's future, let me just summarize how it began. And in 2012, after one group of academics who worked on a hardware wallet built on a Raspberry Pi, after we saw that they failed, me and Stig decided to just do it. Because we saw that the end user security is a real issue for Bitcoin, and our initial idea was to build like 100, 200 units just for friends, just for Bitcoiners these days, because the ecosystem was really small. And when I began in Bitcoin in 2010, my ID on Bitcoin Talks was 2000. So it was really the beginning, and the ecosystem was really small, and there was not so many active people. So we were starting the project aimed for basically for power users, because everybody in Bitcoin was power user. And then we realized that it's making bigger. The ecosystem grew. So just after 2 years, or 1.5 years, we decided to make a business from it, because we initially it was just a hobby project mostly. And we realized that it has some potential, because there is a demand, and this is a real problem which people are facing. So we started Satoshi Labs and started the project. And fast forward a few years, the Trezor was really a successful project so far. But what changed is the population, the people using the Bitcoin, and we saw it like half a year ago, just before the price spiked to 10,000, that the customers completely changed. They don't know what is Bitcoin. They even don't know what is a Bitcoin address, really. Like, one of the most common question on Trezor support was, what the hell is the Bitcoin address? How it looks like? So this is the challenging part of the hardware ecosystem of the hardware wallet project. So I think the hardware itself is quite fine. Of course, we have a Model T freshly released to the market, which have a touch screen, which enable things like on-device management for the on-device recovery of the seed, and all these advanced things, which doesn't leak any kind of seed words or any kind of entropy to the computer. But so the hardware is here, and it has been here for a long time. But the challenging part is to change the ecosystem and to improve the ecosystem in a way that your grandma will be able to use it. We are trying, but we are not there yet. I think it's really improving when I see screenshots from the UI like 3-4 years ago, and compare it with current state of everything. It's really progress, but the feedback is still that, oh, I'm not tech savvy, and I don't know what the seed is, and do I really need to write some words on the paper? It's necessary. Yeah. So we are facing this kind of issue, and the question about the competition, definitely it will come. It's completely it's natural, and we already have a competition, and we already have a clones, like just a repos of the Trezor software. But it's natural that this will come. And the question is, if the product is based on some solid basics, and if it will survive. And I'm pretty sure that there will always be wallet and hardware wallet, and it's about the reputation mostly. Not everybody realize this, that it's probably the most important stuff in this ecosystem. And I'm pretty sure that there will be always space for a company which builds the product on ideas of open source and of full transparency. So I really don't care about big companies stepping into the industry, because they will always like this kind of transparency, because other industries like MP3 players and so on, they don't need to be transparent because they don't deal with the private data and with the security. So our philosophy is to stay on the solid ground and stay with the philosophy which we begin the project when we were in the Prague hackerspace, thinking about how to improve Bitcoin, and I'm sure that we will move forward much more.
Absolutely. Lots of good stuff in there, Slush. I mean, the user interface absolutely has been improving. I mean, it's continuing to get you. I encourage you guys to just go look at screenshots of older versions of Trezor. I mean, it's all beautifully web-based now. I mean, maybe as a web developer, I might add a few more gradients in there, but everything looks absolutely beautiful, Slush, and it really is only getting better and better. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to you guys switching to more dedicated software than I believe the Google Chrome plugin. Maybe you can just quickly talk about how you guys are upgrading that.
Yeah. Well, the question was to move from the Chrome, or sorry, I didn't get it.
I guess so what is it? Why do you guys have to move? First tell the audience, why do you guys have to eventually depreciate the Google Chrome plugin, and tell us what are you moving to and why it's better.
Yeah, well, this is not the first change of the infrastructure, but we decided to go with the web interface because as we are aiming to common users, which like their web browsers, and they are not. Today, it's not common to install any software and use desktop software on the computer for every job. So we want to keep on this level of integration to keep Trezor integrated with the browser. But unfortunately, or it's natural that everything is evolving and browsers are evolving too. So the first wallet worked as a Flash plugin. Based on NP API, which was binary interface to browsers, and it was really legacy stuff, and it was discontinued like years ago. So we were finding a way how to keep it in the browser. So thankfully, the Google introduced the USB API directly into the Chrome apps, so we were able to keep the functionality. But unfortunately, this is also discontinued. So there is a third standard. It's called Web USB, and it's supposed to be open standard, but it's also implemented only in Chrome so far. But I'm positive that other browsers will come. So it's really challenging, and there is a lot of engineering under the hood, which many users don't realize. It's really challenging to keep the hardware token talk with your browser in some sane way. So also because we see that this kind of infrastructure is not stable, so we use as a fallback for unsupported browsers, like or for browsers which don't have Web USB or other Chrome application API for USB, and so we use Bridge. Trezor Bridge is a standalone application which listens on local network interface, and it can bridge the transport from any web-based application to the hardware. So we have multiple ways how to talk with the Trezor, and again, it's really challenging. And just let me talk more about the future of the hardware wallets, because so far I was describing the philosophy of the hardware wallets, but I think it's really there's still a long way to improve the user interface to be really friendly and welcoming for new users. But there's also the security perspective. In the security perspective, because everybody expects the hardware wallet will be secure, like as much as possible, that there is still a lot of challenging things, because not people don't realize that as well as the mining industry is monopolized, also the chip industry, like in processor units, it's always also monopolized. And I was surprised years ago how in what's bad condition of the hardware infrastructure for processors units and the open hardware. I was surprised that there's no open hardware to run open software on top of it. So right now there are two competing ways of doing hardware wallets. One is like what's Trezor doing, and we use as open as possible hardware, which is MCU from STM, which you can buy in the shop on the corner, and you basically don't have any advantage over us at Satoshi Labs, because there is no NDA which we need to sign to build hardware on top of it. And then there's a second way, and it's basically using the chips for banking or for security applications, which sounds really good, but it goes with the side effects, like you are building your stack on closed source chips, and you need to sign up NDA with the manufacturer, and you really can't tell publicly what's inside. And both attitudes have its ups and downs, and both are legit. But I don't think this is the end. I don't think this is the final solution for the hardware wallets. And I'm sure that completely new kind of hardware. So I don't mean the box and the display and buttons, but new kind of ASICs will come, which will be designed for keeping secrets, like private keys, without the need of NDA, in some completely auditable way, and in a way where nobody has any informational advantage. So this is really challenging part of our business, and I'm sure that we will move forward in a few years.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So it sounds like the future is pretty bright, but kind of the most challenging thing really is sourcing those secure chips, right? Making sure that they don't have the same stuff, the same three-letter agency software that all the Intel chips have, pretty much. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. So crazy stuff. So awesome, Slush. Very good information. Let's go ahead and go to Daniel next. Daniel, what are your thoughts on hardware wallets in general, and maybe the future of them? Maybe even kind of throw you a curveball. Like maybe how do you see Slush and other people like that, other hardware wallets maybe integrating into decentralized exchanges in the future, and maybe combining somehow in that way?
Yeah, I mean it's. That's sort of my thought on hardware wallet. I mean, I think especially Trezor's done really sort of fantastic work with it. I've been sort of I don't store anything in hardware wallets, in part just because I feel like I'm too much of a noob, but in part because of sort of concerned that some stuff that I might want to do with it, sort of weirder smart contract type things, wouldn't be supported by it, or it's picking up various splits. I think generally they've done pretty well at that, but to the extent, I think having hardware wallets be more programmable and more flexible, being able to do more things, more operations on the stored private keys would be really interesting. And I don't know, maybe someday we'll come out with Ivy for a version of Ivy that supports hardware wallets, so you can it'll create the contracts for you.
That would be pretty awesome. So yeah, just more integration with the hardware wallet itself, because again, they've only been around for so long. and they are, you know, a little bit difficult to use right now. But, you know, like as Slush mentioned, you know, some people are complaining like, well, they have to write things down. It's like, but this to me, that's really just this learning curve that we all will experience. So just like we all had to learn to type in www, hold on one sec. Like we all had to learn how to type in www. We all had to learn that one wrong character will send you to the wrong address, and we all had to learn what the little @ symbol was. You know, I think that this is a part of the next learning curve of the next version of the internet, the next phase of the internet. As Andreas likes to say, this is kind of the third wave of the internet. We'll just have to learn new stuff again. But go ahead, Slush.
Yeah. Well, the tighter integration of hardware wallet to other, I don't know, altcoins, projects, smart contracts, and so on. It's clearly possible, but recently it was not really easy because hardware wallets are really limited devices on a hardware level, and actually for programming hardware wallet you need to master a lot of skills like embedded programming, low level in C, cryptography, computer science, engineering, and a lot of stuff. And yeah, when we introduced just for a few years back, when we started the project, we actually tried to find already ready-made token which we would like to reprogram for use as a hardware wallet, and we realized that there's nothing like this. We tried to hack some MP3 players and so on, some crazy attempts, but we realized that there's no hardware which would fit our needs. So we decided to do this hardware, the piece of hardware, and because we were software engineers, it was really challenging for us, but thankfully we succeed. But then we realized that even if we do the hardware and we do the software into it, it's still impossible for us to understand everything. And I mean all the kind of scripting languages for smart contracts and all the document signing algorithms and so on. So we had a problem with hardware wallet. It was here. It was available, but still there wasn't enough people willing to implement new functionality, and that's what we are trying to fix with the Model T, and because it looks similarly to Trezor One, but internally it's completely different stuff, and we took the lesson and we set up the internal software stack in a way that it should be really easy for programmers to add new functionality into the device. And we choose the high-level scripting language. It's Python, and there is a Python interpreter running inside this box. So now it's much easier than even before to implement support for new kind of whatever, cryptocurrency, new kind of contracts and so on. And just after 1 week of after releasing of Model T, we already received some pull requests for implementing new altcoin support into the Model T. So far it looks that the philosophy behind the open source development and high-level development, of course, the cryptography is written in C. It's all the low-level stuff. It's here under the hood. But on top of it, there's a high-level scripting language which can interact with the display, with crypto library, with the USB, with the user interface, and it's really easy now to introduce new kind of functionality into the device itself. So we believe that this is one. It's not visible at first sight, but we believe this will be a game changer, because the community will be able to bring a lot new crazy stuff, exciting stuff into the hardware.
So that's pretty huge, Slush. So you're saying that you guys have like an extendable kind of API now that developers can work with to be able to create additional tools, additional features, and have additional coins on the Trezor.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is open sourced, and you can see on the Trezor GitHub, you can see that there is already 1 of 2 pull requests which add a new cryptocurrency to the Trezor, and it's pure Python. No C, no low-level bullshit, no embedded programming, nothing like this. And good stuff is that we have emulator which run on desktop. So you can implement all this. You can run complete stack on your computer, and you can develop everything what you want on your computer with your IDE. And when you are finished, you can just upload it here, and it will run. So it's like Arduino style hardware wallet because we are not focused only to the functionality, but also for extensibility. So
extendability, that's pretty exciting, Slush. I'm looking forward to see all sorts of different things, because it's been you guys kind of 100% having to support every single token on there up until now. But now with this extendable kind of this extensibility, we're maybe more and more coins will be able to really be added on. So that would be a huge game changer. Very awesome news, Slush. I didn't even know that. So that's pretty awesome. So that's on the new Model T, guys. Everybody needs to pick up one of those for sure. So let's go to Michael and get his thoughts on this so far. What are your thoughts on that, Mike? Maybe like the extendability of Trezor and maybe the future of hardware wallets.
Yeah, well, I think hardware wallets are great, and Trezor specifically is a fantastic product. I've really enjoyed playing around with mine, and it's a very common recommendation I give to new people. Just it's much easier for them to get their hands on a Trezor and play with it than expect them to set up an offline Linux machine so they can do all of their secure offline computing one step at a time. As far as extendability, I guess in my mind, I don't think too much about, being able to handle altcoins. It's on my list of priorities. So I don't know if I have much to say about that kind of stuff specifically, but I am excited to see what, additional features and way of interacting with the Bitcoin network will come up with hardware wallets, just in general. So it's
absolutely. I mean, when you unleash the open source community, right, you get amazing results. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I have to agree with that, Michael. Let's go with Francis. What are your thoughts on the discussion so far, Francis? And Trezor, and because I know you've been in the game as long as all of us, Francis. So I'm sure you've had a Trezor just as long as all of us. What are your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know where to start. I'm so excited. I'm a huge fan of Trezor. Like, I'm a unbelievable fan of hardware wallets in general. I've had this Trezor for 4 years. It actually even has Slush's signature on the back, but I wiped out because I use it so much. This has signed for sure at least 100,000 inputs, and it has never failed me. This is part of incalculable amount of multi-sigs as well that I use in consulting, in my business, in my personal life, and all sorts of things. So one of my favorite parts of explaining Bitcoin to someone is when we get to the hardware wallet, and then I get to explain what a hardware wallet is, and then they get to understand what a wallet is, and they get to understand that a wallet is not a wallet, it's a keychain. And it's not only a keychain, but it's also like your little tiny mini key maker, right? So this thing has 2 main functions in the Bitcoin space, in the Bitcoin using, is to, 1, generate the keys securely, which is usually one of the main places where something can go wrong. So when you generate your key, that's where you can be hacked, you can have your identity, your key stolen or anything like that, or have some bad entropy or have some pre-generated key show up in there. And this also, the other function is just to sign, right, the transaction. So when you're using this, and I use this personally with Electrum, because Electrum has a lot of functionalities. And the point is, like, the wallet, when you're using it, like Electrum, all it does, it's just giving suggestions to the Trezor, right? So your wallet will like construct a transaction. You can do all sorts of stuff. And I think maybe Slush, you misinterpreted Dan's comment regarding the smart contract, because Dan's smart contracts are Bitcoin smart contracts. But the way that I see it, like you can prepare all the scripts and you could just send them to the Trezor to sign off on and to do the signature. So I think that I don't think there's any compatibility issue there. So I mean, this is just fantastic. I mean, I started selling the Trezor when it came out in 2014. At the Bitcoin Embassy in Montreal. So I've been really familiar with that. Every time there was a 3-for-2 promotion on the Trezor website, I would scoop up some to get that nice 33% retail discount, and I would sell them. I've been also selling the Ledger. And when I speak about Trezor, my enthusiasm is for hardware wallets in general, but obviously Trezor is my first love and is the one that I actually use. So I'll just talk about that. Regarding also like the off brands, like about 3 years ago, we discovered an off-branded version of Trezor, which was called Bcoin. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that, Slush. It was the round Trezor. Do you remember the round knockoff Trezor? Yeah, B-Wall.
No way.
Yeah. So I ordered some just for fun, and then but I never obviously, like when you see that thing, you're like, shit, I'm not gonna put money in this. Like, I'm not gonna put my Bitcoins in this. Like, I'm gonna stick to the one I trust because it's open source, because there's all sorts of guarantees, and because there's all sorts of things. So there's also so one of the main problems, as Slush has said, is end user. We call it key management policy. You know, key generation key management policy. This is Bitcoin's Achilles heel. Because Bitcoin is, you know, censorship resistant and trustless and decentralized, it's not forgiving, right? So if you lose your keys, you're completely, you know, and you can lose all sorts of things. And we'll get to identity later, because we need to talk a little bit about Trezor and identity as well, and crypto identity. So yeah, so that's like one of the main challenges. And as someone who worked at the Bitcoin Embassy, I can tell you that, and I personally sleep at night because of the Trezor. As someone who's worked at the Bitcoin Embassy, like, Trezor is always kind of a bonus when you do a large transaction with a client. We often just throw in a Trezor in the meanwhile and explain them how it works, because it's such a powerful tool. I mean, it solves almost all of the problems. You put that with a metallic, backup, and then you can forget all sorts of things. And that the barrier to what this has done is reduce the barrier to entry, while also like really keeping the client side and sovereignty of the user kind of intact. So it's a crazy achievement. So other things also, Slush touched on a really good point, which is usability and UX is a security component, because if no one uses the security like it's supposed to, and they're trying to get shortcuts around it because your UI sucks or something, then your product is not secure. They need to use it. So it's a really amazing craft, right, and an art to create good Bitcoin UX in order to incentivize the user into making the right choices, and all sorts of trade-offs. But in the case of the Trezor, that's good, because all of that is in the UI. And for guys like me, I'll just use it with Electrum, right, or their command line. So this thing acts as a keychain, and like one part of my life, which is not, and I use this as part of the cold storage policy of my companies, and I sign batches of transactions co-signed with this. So another part of my life is consulting, where I'm a blockchain consultant, where essentially I advise people to use public key infrastructure in Merkle trees, and sometimes put some Merkle roots in a Bitcoin OP return. And then almost any kind of scheme that I can devise for a client involves at some point some kind of you want to keep the aspect of the sovereign identity, right? So you want to distribute keys. For example, if I'm doing a supply chain management plugin that uses blockchain tech, what I'm doing is I'm essentially distributing keys to participants in the chain. We're creating an app where they can sign some kind of thing, and the other guy can sign some kind of thing. But that, we're always assuming that the end users of the platform will be signing off using cryptographic keys, because the way that we are, the way that crypto works is like you have a crypto identity. So Trezor can be used in all the designs that I think of. I always think of a hardware wallet. I honestly, I usually think of the little ledger, like $3-5 things. But once the Trezor is like super cheap, I think this is going to work. But this is like the future of identity is using these devices at some point. And as a consultant, like this is super useful. So other things you can do with the Trezor right now, which I've done, is you can generate your PGP keys on this thing, which is super cool. I think that, you know, if I was a programmer and I had a lot of spare time, I would do a Keybase plugin for this. I would do a lot of things for that. So one thing you can do is also SSH. So this is how my developers connect to our server, is via a Trezor that I've bought for them. Another thing you can do with well, basically, you can do a lot of stuff. Like one of the things that I'm working on is authentication. So Bitcoin is really cool because you have HD keys and you can register like a master public key on a website. And every time you log in, take the last block of the blockchain or generate some kind of secret, and you can sign it, and you can use different keys every time because I know they're all part of the same HD key. So you can have all sorts of like crazy, amazing things to do with this hardware wallet. I'll just end by disclosing that I'm not paid by Trezor. I'm just such a huge fan, and I think like this is, you know, the essence of like the cypherpunk entrepreneur. Like if something doesn't work, you build it, and then you commercialize it, and you use, you know, the profit motive to finance that, and you find an. I mean, this is just such a great story to tell about the Bitcoin space, and the future of hardware wallets, I think, is that they're going to be reused for a lot of things. If you want a good example of what the future of hardware wallet is, look at what Airbit is doing, Edge. So you know, it's like a single place where this is like your mini, as I said, your mini key maker, your keychain for all sorts of things. And this is going to be 2FA. And I really think that as the security problems that we're seeing are freaking people out more and more and causing all sorts of damage, we're going to see all sorts of security outsourced to these tiny little devices that are never connected to the internet.
Absolutely. And so I assume then you see them playing a huge role then with decentralized exchanges, because this is integrated into your entire business. This is basically what your business is powered by now. So it seems to reason that decentralized exchanges would also want to take advantage of all of this utility in these type of hardware devices, and so as to allow us to keep control of our private keys. What do you think about that, Francis?
Yeah, I mean, those hardware devices are perfect for redundant anonymous login. So when you want a user to use a service anonymously and kind of log out and come back, but you're still hosting some of his data, for example, like transactions history or a balance. So normally, obviously, you do that with some kind of password email scheme, which obviously can de-anonymize the user in all sorts of ways. So, I mean, to me, a decentralized exchange should not have anything other than this. Eventually, there's no other reason why you would have that. Anything else, nothing else is required.
Awesome. Yeah, it's just so interesting how powerful, you know, hardware devices like Trezor are when they truly are open source and have the open source ethos behind it and the passion, the amount of utility that we can get out of this. And again, this all just goes to Bitcoin, right? This all goes back to Bitcoin. This is the power, you know, that Bitcoin provides us. It brings the power of nation states down to the individual, and this is what's I think is the future. So very awesome stuff. I believe Michael had a quick question for Slush. So go ahead, Michael.
Well, yeah. So you had talked a little bit about the trust issues with the hardware itself. I was wondering to hear more about what Trezor is doing to deal with trust issues and privacy issues with the web interface and stuff. So, like, for instance, currently with the Trezor, you connect to Trezor's servers for blockchain data. Are there any plans in the pipeline to be able to connect to my own full node?
Yeah, sure. Just to clarify, there are two topics. First is security, and the second is privacy. And Trezor is primarily aimed for security and solve the security and the life cycle of the generation of keys and signing transactions and so on. And privacy is completely different topic, because well, with the limited hardware as a hardware wallet is, you need to interact with some user interface and even with the blockchain. And clearly today it's not possible to have a full interface on a device. Even mobile phones, which have a full stack with operating system and internet connection and so on, even they have a problem with the SPV protocol and full privacy. So we are primarily focused on the security, and the privacy is optional, and it's basically on the user. As Francis said, it's possible to run hardware wallets with the desktop clients. We have even some prototypes of Trezor working directly with the Bitcoin core with the full node. So it's the best option, of course, but it's for nerdy users or for power users. And another option is to work with the Electrum, which is better, but still you need Electrum servers, which, yeah, well, you can run it locally, but it's cumbersome, it's not easy to set up. So we primarily built the product for end users, and we want to make it easy to use, secure as much as possible, and it requires these two things requires some high-level user interface. So we choose as a primary user interface the web browser. But as everything is open source, all the stack is open and documented, we more than welcome some integrations with other wallets. Actually, we are working on the improvements there. Like we are writing our own cryptocurrency backend. Like right now, we use Bitcore. It's a bit-based blockchain indexer, but it has its own architectural issues, and we are not very satisfied with this. So we are in the final stage of testing our new backend, which is written in a Go, by the way, Golang, which will be, of course, fully open source, and it's aimed for altcoin support, for easy altcoin support. So you can index all Bitcoin-like coins just by changing the configuration and so on. And so we aim to have a full stack, which will be easy to install on a user's computer. So our open source multi-currency backend, our web wallet running in some electronic application. So all the stack will be local, which it's possible also today because everything, but it's really hard even for power users. So primarily we are focusing for end users, but we are we welcome some power users and this kind of usage as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Very cool. Yeah, lots of future stuff. But go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so like when the fork happened, obviously I wanted to use a full node with my Trezor. So I actually had an Electrum server running. So in that way I could use, and one of the main reasons I use Electrum is because it allows me to connect with my own full node. And when Bitcoin Core comes out with Trezor support, I'll probably just use Bitcoin Core. But when you look at your Trezor web wallet, you'll see that there's a bunch of Bitcore servers. So you know, I haven't tried it with mine, Slush, but as far as I understand, like you can use the Trezor web wallet with your own Bitcore Insight backend, right? Like I could just drop in my URL and it would work, right?
Yes, if you install it locally and in the wallet settings, you point the wallet to your backend, it will work. And it's even possible to download the snapshot of the wallet because it's the wallet itself doesn't have any active server side. It's just a bunch of JavaScript and HTML. You can download the whole app locally, so you know there's no local modification. So, it's it works even today, but we don't advertise it too much because it's still cumbersome for normal users. But we are going this way.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm gonna have to experiment with that.
Absolutely. Don't verify, or verify, don't trust, people. That's what you got to do. Verify, don't trust, and that's what these guys are really excited about for integrating the hardware wallet into their own full node, so we don't have to rely on any externalities. So very, very cool. Really excited to hear about your custom backend there, Slush, with Golang. That's going to be interesting because I've used Bitcore as well, and I think that's kind of one of the main staples in the industry. But it is kind of getting dated. It's not really being supported, the way I like it. And of course, BitPay, the company itself, has 8 bazillion issues. So yeah, very interesting to see. When do you expect that to roughly kind of come out for? Are you going to release that with the Model T, or is that to come later?
Yeah. So far we aimed to release of Model T, and it made us busy for some recent months. But today, since today, we want to add features to the Trezor itself. But right now we are trying more to focus on the ecosystem around the device. And this backend, which will be focus on the extensibility and the speed and performance, because when you run like 20 backends for some crazy coins, the performance is also the issue. So right now we are focusing more on this infrastructure, and I suppose it's a matter of month or two when well, it's open source. It's already open source, but it's just not finished yet.
Not finished, yeah. So that's going to be really interesting. Yeah, I encourage everybody to go and check that out because Bitcore is getting dated, and again, it's from BitPay, so we need more Bitcoin backends to be able to interact with the blockchain itself. It's kind of rough right now in that area. So very interesting to see. So thank you for that, Slush. Adding more to the open source ecosystem. So very, very, very cool. Does anybody have any other topic or any other things to say or any questions for Slush before we end it?
Just regarding the Bitcore backend. So as the Slush may know, because we've been running Slush's fork of Bitcore for quite some time for things, and I just want to let you know that we have just decided to move off of Bitcore and do our own backend in Go, but we haven't started work. So thank you very much, and you'll be hearing from us in the near future as we gladly collaborate on your project instead of starting from scratch. So thanks a lot for that. And so Satoshi Labs, Slush's company, was maintaining the Bitcore fork that was SegWit compatible, which allowed all the web apps like mine that were built on Bitcore to have SegWit ready, sooner rather than later. So that's also something that I don't think a lot of people know that, but yeah, they were supporting a critical piece of infrastructure there for everyone.
Man, that's huge. Thank you so much for that, Slush. That's awesome, man. Yeah, this stuff is awesome, guys. Open source, Bitcoin, there's not much you can do to take it down. There are people like Francis and Slush that will build these things, that will just will these things into existence for the community at large. So very awesome, guys. Very awesome show. Went a little bit over there, but really appreciate everybody joining us. We had a lot of good topics in there. I did have one more topic to go, but we're already over. So I think we had a great job. I hope you guys learned some information, learn some new stuff. Hopefully you don't think it turned into a little bit of a Trezor commercial there, but hey, again, guys, Trezor is one of the staples of the ecosystem. They are one of the biggest open sources contributors to the ecosystem. So very, very, very awesome and honored to have Slush on here and to be talking about Trezor in general. So very, very cool. So let's go ahead and end it. Let's ask everybody where they can find more information. So Michael, thanks so much for joining us, man, for the first time. Had a great time, man. Where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, thank you. Best place to start is my Twitter at Bitstein, BITSTEIN. You can also check out the Noted Bitcoin podcast I co-host with Pierre Rochard. That's noted.org, NODED.org. And finally, my now almost 5-year-old website, the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, which you can find at nakamotoinstitute.org.
Absolutely. Again, I say it a few times, guys, but look, Nakamoto Institute is mandatory reading for all cypherpunks. You guys must check it out. Mr. Francis, where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, same as Michael. I'm hanging out on Twitter a lot, except this week because I was changing phones. So at Francis Pouliot _. Otherwise, you can check out my website, bylls.com. or Catallaxy, CATALLAXY.com. And yeah, I also encourage people to read the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. I just want to say it's actually quite a privilege to meet Michael in person, because his readings have been very, very influential, and also very, very useful as kind of a crash course in how can you put yourself in my mindset after being in Bitcoin for 5 years. Just go through that thing and read it all, and perhaps you'll get a glimpse. So that's a really useful thing to have in your back pocket. Just the Nakamoto reading list. Yeah, so that's it.
Absolutely. I mean, the Nakamoto list is like it's just woke, people. It's just hashtag woke. Once you read that, you will get insights into what it means to, you know, hypothesize and think about Bitcoin and how it could eventually grow into something and how it evolves, because it's just so complicated, guys. It's, you know, as you guys know, it's made up of computer science, cryptography, and on and on and on. So reading this papers, it will give you new people, especially, an insight into what Bitcoin could possibly evolve into. So very, very awesome stuff. Just real quick, Michael, I got to ask you, man, because you are a crypto carnivore, like what did you eat for breakfast?
I had a ribeye, of course.
There you go. Ribeye for breakfast, people.
If people want to learn about that, they can go to my other website, justmeat.co.
Justmeat.co, guys. If you want to be a crypto carnivore like Michael and be healthy, check it out. All right, Daniel, where can we find out more information from you, sir?
Yeah, so the best place to find me probably is my Twitter at Dan Robinson. You can also, I'd also encourage everyone to check out the Ivy Playground for my Bitcoin smart contract language, Ivy. So you can find that on ivy-lang, ivy-lang.org. And that lets you try out Ivy and create your own Bitcoin smart contracts.
Absolutely, and that is continuing to evolve, guys. That is open source too, I believe. Right?
That's right.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So that's open source, continuing to evolve, getting better and better every day, guys. Got to check that out. That will make writing smart contracts on Bitcoin much, much easier. So check that out. Very, very cool. They're going to be integrating with all sorts of other stuff as well throughout the ecosystem. So awesome stuff. And finally, Slush, the main man. I mean, everybody knows who you are, where we can find you, but just in case, Slush, where can we find out more about you?
Thank you for invitation to your stream, and everybody can follow me on the Twitter /CZ. Actually, I'm trying to limit my online appearance and focus on doing things, but I hang out there more than I like, so you are free to follow me there. Thank you.
Awesome. So guys, had a great time. Thanks so much for joining us. We had about 500 to 700 live viewers there during the whole time. So really appreciate everybody joining us. If you guys missed the show, you know, definitely join us in the comments if you guys are listening to this at another time. But we really appreciate it if you could join us live. We are here, of course, every Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. And we are, of course, in the WCN audio stream where we have syndicate lots and lots of different content on there. And hopefully one day we'll get the Noted podcast. I'm working on it. I'm working on Pierre and Michael right now. So, you know, we'll get it on there. But definitely, guys, check that out when you get a chance. And we really appreciate you joining. And thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks so much to my guests for donating their time. Really appreciate it, guys. We almost went 2 hours. So thanks again so much. I hope everybody learned something. And, you know, until next time, guys, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys later.